Hey, Patrick, how you doing, bud?
Not too bad at all, buddy. So, what video have you today for us?
So we have trigonometry interviewing a fellow by the name of Arthur C. Brooks, who's a professor at Vanderbilt, came from Harvard, and he has a few number one bestsellers, functionally how to live your best kind of life, right? So we'll
Okay.
put the show notes will have all that stuff for you guys, and you can check it out. So we're gonna let him start cooking and listen to what the man has to say.
Why is it that people pursue forms of activism that are not actually effective? Because if you wanted meaning, like I get a lot of meaning from doing trigonometry because I feel like we're contributing to the cultural discussions and shaping them in a way that we think is true and matters a lot. And from the feedback we get from people, I hear that it makes a meaningful impact in their lives. And
Right. So that's functionally the same thing that we're doing. So this brings up why it is that people are functionally just spinning their wheels and not achieving any kind of goal that they say that they want to achieve. We are being victims of a thing, and you need to pay attention to
People
the
are trying
victim.
to people are trying to find a reason why they're stuck in a rut. Is the best way to put it.
Well, and you feel like you
Yeah.
can't get ahead, and then you need to feel something, and this is how you do
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah. Activism on both sides. It's very much like that. I am impressed because this is going wrong in the whole world, or this is going wrong in the whole country. Yeah.
Right. And I think that it's a fairly mature thing that we try to do to give a fair and balanced and fairly stoic, not super excited, like screaming, yelling, super emotional.
Yeah.
Right. So our stance is that if we can calmly discuss these, use critical thinking skills, and come to better conclusions, you and I don't agree on everything, but we
No.
understand the other person's perspective isn't just lost out there, right? We both were raised differently in different countries, so some of our perspectives are going to be different, but we respect the other person's opinion. I feel like the people who are doing this screaming, yelling activism stuff, they aren't taking the time to understand any other platform besides the thing that they're emotional about.
Yes, and the funny thing is, he goes on later on that it's right for the left as well as the right. Like neither side now seems to want or willing to meet each other in the middle when
Well,
it
it
comes to
used to
any
be
discussions.
it used to be that we understood the end goal is to improve our countries, have a better way of life, have more meaning in life. But now it seems like those things are crowded out by my side is right, your side is wrong. And we're not discussing methods to achieve agreed upon goals. We're just screaming and yelling at each other across the aisle.
Yeah, and it seems to be more and more as people get more and more frustrated with their circumstances in life. That there's more yelling going on. There's more protests. There's more playing the victim is the best word to describe it.
That to me is meaning. That's
Right.
real meaning. But if I was engaged in something that was not producing any outcome and was in fact not geared to producing any outcome, was simply attending protests for the sake of feeling like I am with other people who are achieving effectively nothing, I wouldn't find that meaningful.
Yeah.
Why do people pursue forms of activism that don't actually achieve anything at all?
It feels like when we're watching these videos and we do the research on these things, there seems to be a complete disconnect from something that is functional and helps people to I just want you to see me being emotional about a thing. I want to be the
Yes.
victim here. I want you to see how bad things are for me. And the rest of the world looks at it and says, you're in a first world country. You have functionally the lap of luxury. And a lot of the people who are doing this are rich. They have lots of money and they have these opinions that seem to just break with reality. And then tons of people want to follow them and say, hey, you can't do things here because we don't like it. Well, my country has a constitution. Your country has a constitution. We can do the things we're doing, and then we get screamed at for exercising our rights.
Yes. And I think the problem with an awful lot of young people, especially talking about the under 30 group now, when I'm talking about this group, is they're so easily led now by social media and algorithms. They fall down rabbit holes. He'll probably go into doom scrolling and so on. That they get so easily sucked into either the left or the right very easily with algorithms. So
Right.
we've often come across, when we Google one thing, it goes off in whatever tangent it thinks will sell its product. Because you can even see the difference between my Google results and your Google results. And we Google the same sentence and get completely different results.
Well,
Just based on our past search histories.
We were watching Frank Wright discussing the marketization of all concepts and ideas. So we don't get to be our own selves because we are guided by these algorithms. All the things that we start searching, I have 4 different, at this point, three or 4 different profiles I use to search stuff. Because if I don't, I will not get any kind of varied anything. It's why I use like 1440 epic times and those kinds of things to at least give me some sort of semblance of who is saying what and how. And a news story will break, say something on SCOTUS, and the left will say, we won. And the right will say, it's a victory for the current administration. We're like, no, it doesn't mean either one of those things.
Yeah, that's funny actually, because I can't remember what story, but if you read it through it wasn't a victory for either side. It was just, he signed an executive order, it's gone to the courts, and now they're debating it. The end. That's the whole story. But as you said, we got completely different headlines. But when you read the actually proper press announcement, it was like, no one won.
Well,
no victory for anyone.
All it is it's a nothing burger, but does it have ketchup or mustard on the damn burger?
No, it doesn't.
It's just a plain ass burger, and everybody's screaming and yelling about how this is the best burger ever.
Yeah, some of the headlines around it were quite interesting. You're kind of going, I have to admire their creative writing in a lot of cases.
Well, one answer, which is an incomplete answer, is that it's performative.
Okay.
But it's not performative to others. It's performative to yourself. That the meaning comes from showing that you care about something enough to be angry about it, to have to put yourself into a hot hedonic state.
The other part of that is emotional labor, and confusing emotional labor for actual functional work that gets things done.
I think it was that. Was it That Saves America? I remember we were looking at one of his videos there recently, where he tries to explain how the economics works between labor and end result.
Right.
Same with activism. You need people to have an end result.
I believe it's Jevon or Jervin's law that discusses the equation.
By the way, later on it became circular economics. But at the end of the day, in order for any of these protests to work, you need people / labor in order to move it forward. To make out the signs, to turn up, to manage the logistics, all the bits and bobs that go into all these protests, no matter who it is, by the way, left or right.
These protests, the protests don't seem to be performing the function they want them to perform. And he's right, it is performative at self, but it's also performative as a group, but it's not performative in such a way where it says, these are our clear goals, and here's how we want to achieve them because we believe a thing, and here's the evidence-based things we have that show that our concepts and ideas are solid. They don't have that. Just have screaming matches, and they whine and bitch at each other.
By the way, I've seen that on both sides of the protesting. By the way, when we look at protests from different parts, I'm thinking some of the UK protests as well, left and right. By the way, I'm not going to pick either. They do a lot of roaring and shouting, a lot of great speeches, but there's no kind of substance there. It's like, I'm talking just climate change, right? You want to do climate change. How are you going to go about that? Well, we're going to get rid of fossil fuels. What are you going to do to replace them? I don't know. And you could look at the right. What most of the right protest is, we want to get rid of all immigrants. Okay. Are you going to do the jobs they're doing? And how are you going to replace that labour market? Well, we'll get British people to do it. Okay. Will you brush toilets? Not me, but I know another guy who would. Neither side have a clear goal what they need these protests.
Right. It's because
they have great rhetoric, great talking points, but no, this is how we're going to achieve X, Y, and Z.
And that's what I was saying before.
It's all just sitting there, meeting people who think the same as you, big social meeting, you all roar and shout, and then you go home afterwards and feel better about yourselves.
Again, it's performative, but the problem is neither side of the aisle can agree what the end goal is now. Before in politics, at least when I was young, it was understood. We need to balance the budget. We need to stop a thing, or we need to encourage a thing. Okay, now both sides talk about how do we achieve this goal that we agree is the goal. right? Once neither side can agree on an end goal, then they can't work together to achieve that goal. There can be no bipartisan function when it's the screaming and the yelling and there's no clear end goal.
To feel intense levels of negative emotionality. It just shows that you can actually feel something, for Pete's sake. Look, you're doing the show, really, really good, but you're not in a hot hedonic state. On the contrary, it'd be terrible if you're just yelling the whole time. I mean, there are people who try to do that in media, but they would be a less effective medium if you were doing that. But there are a lot of people who just can't feel anything. They're not feeling anything. They're completely numb. And so what they get involved in forms of very, very performative activism because it makes them feel alive, maybe for the first time in a long time.
Again, that's why we don't scream and yell, and we try to parse out what's good quality end goals and how those people we're interacting with from a third party stance, what their stated goals are and what they're doing to achieve those things. And it gives us a much more clear picture of why things might be happening, right? We try not to roll in loud screaming rhetoric, regardless of what our points of view and our values are and those kinds of things. But we tend to be calm, cool, collected. And although Patrick and I don't agree, he'll say, Alex, I don't agree. And I'll say, well, golly, Patrick, why is that? Well, here, I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. But here's my counterpoint to that and why I believe the thing that I believe. And then we drill down into the subject to find out what's the meat here, like what's really going on? What's the conflict, right? How do we achieve an appropriate epiphany about this so we can both help the other person have a much clearer view of the concept, as opposed to, like you said, being in a hot hedonic state where we're just involved in the screaming, the yelling, and the victimology of it.
And that happens quite a lot, especially with the new algorithms and so around social media and the news in general, is the more we look at news stories and past the headlines, as you say, get into the meat and potatoes of a subject, you find that it's not really as bad as one side is saying, or whatever side is sprouting the headline at the time. Once you dig into the facts and figures of certain news headlines, you're kind of going, the world is not on fire. The world is not that bad. It's okay. It's not bad. It's not great in some aspects, but it's not always on fire. And that's what he's saying, is people get riled up on both sides of the aisle, by the way, by headline after headline after headline. And it just, as he said, just gets people so angry that they end up doing something silly sometimes.
One of the biggest things we have an issue with on this show, and we've seen it multiple times, is anyone from any angle saying, believe the science, and then they don't show any peer-reviewed science that exhibits their side is in any way correct about anything. Well, believe the science. You got to believe the science. Well, show me the science, bud.
Yeah.
What do you got? What's the science?
Yeah, the problem is certain politicians have made it very hard for people to believe scientists anymore, which is a shame. Is if a scientist says X, they'll pay another scientist to say Y. And it's a shame that that is happening in the modern world, because young people are so easily led, especially the young people, say, in the bottom 60% of the economic curve. They're already suffering, economically, but then they turn around and have to question science because such and such a scientist said this and such a scientist said the other thing. And you're leading to a situation of they end up believing no one, or they believe some wild theories out there when it comes not just science, but other avenues. And it's an awful, awful shame that young people are so trapped in this endless cycle of misery, is the only way I could describe it.
You know what takes actual work? Actually delving into the evidence-based peer-reviewed documentation about the concept you want to discuss. That represents real work. For instance, remember we were doing show prep stuff with Doubting Thomas the other day. We're like, what are we going to talk about? Well, we want to talk about this. We want to talk about that. And the COVID devil came up. And what is it, like a 4 or 5 hour conversation? But in the whole thing, we're pulling up documents. We're pulling up things that show, hey, this is what this person has shown. This is evidence-based. This is like peer-reviewed stuff, right? And both of you were doing the same thing. I was putting in my angle from the side and producing some actual research and work myself. So we came to a better understanding. We still didn't agree, even after 4 or 5 hours of conversation.
Because there's so much contradictions out there now on the internet.
Right. But the
And by the way,
problem is that, hold on a
a
second.
lot of the
Hold on a second.
problem is,
Hold on a second. So the problem we're having is that these short slogans that don't actually solve problems or issues are being shouted across the aisle at each other, and they will not get together and say, again, look, here's an end goal, right? Our way of life needs to and or could be improved if we blah. And then all sides agree it's an end goal, and then we discuss the method. It used to be a method thing. Now it's I have this list of platform things that I believe in. You have this list of platform things that are exactly at odds with it. And because that's the case, we are not going to work together in a bipartisan way to achieve a goal. And then we use slogans as opposed to the work of actually doing research through peer review and through good like debate and function. It's just not happening, right?
But I think the problem is with especially with science at the moment, is a lot of them get easily bought off to say X or to say Y.
Right.
Even though some of the scientists in their own heart and souls know what they're saying is completely untrue. And it leads people down a very dangerous path. Because when it comes to anything scientific, what I normally do is I ask a good friend of mine who's actually a PhD scientist who works in the medical field about X, Y, and Z. Because I go to a guy who actually knows what he's talking about.
Hold on, a subject matter expert who might know a thing about the thing. Okay.
Yes. I normally do that. I don't trust a lot of the science that comes out of, say, the United States for the most part. I'm not just picking on you, but Germany and France, as other countries as well, other scientists are easily bought and paid for. But I just go to a guy who knows things. It's basically, if I don't know how to wire something at home, I hire an electrician. You know, I go to where the facts are or meet the person who knows the facts. I don't just rely on the magical world of the internet or some other magical entity out there. I prefer to just ask the person who actually knows how the science works or how to wire the plug or how to do X, Y, and Z. It's probably the easiest way. A lot of young people don't do that, unfortunately. Or within their circle, they have a tendency not to ask the person who says studying, say, in the local university medicine or studying philosophy, or ask the person who's actually studying the subject, what does all this mean in, layman terms, if you know what I mean?
We were watching James Lindsay, who was discussing the peer review process, and he and Helen Pluckrose and Peter Boghossian were part of a situation where they were submitting absolutely wild documents that were not even close to the truth to peer-reviewed sources who were then publishing many of these papers that were not realistic in any way. So the peer review process is also broken.
And the funny thing is, I asked somebody about the peer review process, only going by the universities in Ireland, by the way. And it's a really strict process over here. But over there it's just like the wild west. There seems to be, if you write the right paper at the right time, it'll get published. If you know, that's actually the point he proved, by the way.
It seems that it's much less rigorous out here, for sure. All right, we're going
that's why a lot of European scientists usually don't rely on US science that much anymore, because it's so murky,
watered down
in a lot of ways.
It's a really an extraordinary thing. I mean, they're spending their time scrolling and, dating online, and it's just incredibly numbing behaviors. They kind of wiped out all sense of boredom, but their lives are grindingly boring. And so the result of it is they want to feel something, maybe for the first time in a long time, is what it comes down to. The second problem is that a lot of young people today have been effectively conscripted into a culture war by baby boomers, and they've been made to understand that their identity is in a form of grievance. And this is very common. This is the best way to manipulate people, is to help them to create a victim identity. That's identity.
So the thing that James Lindsay and them did was called the grievance studies. And when you discuss these things, this angle is specifically correct, right? Their whole identity is the victimhood. Their whole identity has been led through the algorithms and the culture war for them to believe that, yes, I am a victim. And as opposed to me doing real work, I will show this hot hedonic state where I am screaming and yelling and you can see me, but because you see me, it's performative not only for myself, but for anybody who's in observance.
Yes. And it seems to be more and more, I would say in the last 10 to 15 years, it's really kind of ramped up, not just in Europe or across all the G20, among young people. They seem to be really angry on both sides, by the way. They seem to be really revved up to 90 in a lot of ways. And it's not good for your mental health to be constantly with your engine redlining all the time. It's not good for your own mental health at all whatsoever.
Right, which has led to a ton of diagnosed anxiety and depression.
Oh, big time. And by the way, on both sides of the aisle, you can see it a mile away that young people are just not happy. And as you say, they're living in a really wealthy time in human history. We have access to medical care if we get sick. We have access to clean running water. We have electricity. We have, as you say, we have the internet. We have all these positive social developments, but people are still not happy. And I can understand why some young people are not happy, because they have a snowball chance of hell of, for the most part, of ever getting on the property ladder. Their jobs are 9 to 5, stacking shelves, or really, I would say, low skilled work compared to their qualification. I can understand their anger, but you have to start looking at the positives as well. Or maybe what I always suggest to young people is clean out your algorithm. Young people don't even know how to clean their algorithm on YouTube or whatever. Just clean your algorithm, start from scratch, and start looking at some positive news. You know, there's a lot of positive things happening in the world. It's not always on fire.
Well, the job market's even worse than that. It's not that you can't even get a stocking job from 9 to 5. You have to get a job as a barista here and then as a cashier there. You're functionally having to get 2 or 3 jobs to get 40 to 50 hours a week. And none of them will you be provided healthcare because you're not a full-time employee, which means you're going to have to lean on the state to provide your medical insurance, which means that you're paying taxes into a system and you're getting your medical insurance from what's your NIH, your medical out there?
Well, the health service over here, yes.
Okay, so
we get medical. Yeah, if you earn less than, well, it changes every budget. At the moment is it 39,000 a year. If I remember the last budget,
right,
39,000
and you
a
get
year.
full access. But in the United States, we have places like Walmart that will not hire you full time. Grocery stores, which used to have career-based jobs, you go be the butcher, you could go be in charge of the deli, or even the deli worker, the cashiers would have full-time employment and get benefits. Now you work 2 or 3 small jobs, and then if you get sick, then you lose all of your little small jobs. The employers aren't out anything, and now you're completely dependent on the state, but now you can't pay rent because you have no protection against that at all. So that's a lot of the anger. You can't get a career-based job, even if you get a college degree. And
well,
the college
the
degrees
problem is,
go ahead.
Yeah, over here it's slightly different. We have good social safety net for the most part, say, in Europe, where if you do lose your job, there's a lot of social nets there to catch you. Either it be weekly payments, your mental card, rent subsidy, so on. There's a lot of more social acceptance of helping each other up. Where in the United States, it's more of, well, if you're down now, get a job. Well, I can't get a job. Well, not our problem. You know, it's very much look after your own self, Jack, kind of attitude, I find over there.
But the problem is our youth is not attempting to get marketable skills either. They're just doom scrolling their phone and being sad about it, as opposed to putting their nose to the grindstone and actually doing something that isn't that hot hedonic state of emotional labor that means nothing to ananybody except yourself. It's performative and non-functional.
We did watch a video from a young lady. Was in Minnesota or no? Where was it? It was a cold state anyway, where a lot of
West Virginia. It was West Virginia.
West Virginia.
Yes.
And they had massive unemployment, just because the area, a lot of the coal mining closed, a lot of coal plants closed, and so on. Through no fault of their own, it just happened. And that's the problem, is there was no social net as much to catch these people.
Right. Oh, and
And
on
it's our
top of
fun.
that, those people want to work. They want
They do.
to provide for their families.
But if you turn around and you say that to the average American, well, these people genuinely can't get a job. Why can't they? There's no jobs around. Well, that's not my problem. You're kind of going, it's a very, I wouldn't say social damaging way to look at things. There has to be some way that they help each other up. By the way, not long term, but enough to get over that hump onto the next stage or the next job.
Absolutely. If they get the hand up, then they can get to the place with a job and then again provide for the family, which is what they're looking to do. But they don't want the government to be as intrusive as it is. And there's a negative impact feeling for if you're on the social net where the government is helping you, then you look like you are lazy and non-functional. And that sense of independence, especially in that area of the country, is very, very high. There's 30 to 40% of the population that could get social benefits, but they don't because culturally they feel like they have failed if they accept the handout. They don't want a handout. They just want to work. They want to do the thing to support the family.
Identity politics, but the most single toxic kind of identity that you can have is that I'm a victim. This is what.
Why is it toxic?
It's toxic because you're looking in the mirror and saying, I'm aggrieved. I don't know who I am if I'm not feeling bad. You know, and this is the exact antithesis of Christianity or any good, serious, nutritious religion, which is to look in the mirror and say, I'm a beloved child of God. What's my identity? Child of God. It's profoundly positive. But if you look in the mirror and you say, I'm the victim of discrimination. I'm somebody who's actually suffered marginalization. I'm somebody who's on the short end of the stick. That's terrible as an identity. That's the recipe for anxiety and depression, which.
If you're constantly saying I'm a victim, but you can't identify the victimizer, that's also a problem. Or if you misidentify, which is what is normally happening, they misidentify the victimizer and they say, well, this entity or thing is the thing that is victimizing me. And then as opposed to saying, hey, victimizer, in a very level and even tone, I believe you're victimizing me. Here's what I'm experiencing. Is there a way that we can maybe work out why it is I'm being victimized?
But I think he actually made a very good point there as well, where an awful lot of people play the victim. I would say, no, especially as he said, if you're on the short end of the stick and you're looking around going, well, I can't get a job. Okay, these things happen economically, whatever. The next one is you look down and you see X and Y getting a job over me. You're currently going, why did he get the job and not me? And that kind of feeds into the whole victim narrative as well. We see a lot of, especially just massive unemployment in certain areas. And I think a lot of, by the way, both left and right, do play into the short end of the stick. The guys and girls who are hard done by for various reasons. And they sell them a narrative, whatever it be. And it's very easy to kind of lead them down the rabbit hole of either argument.
Of course, it has produced.
And what if, what would you say to people who will say to you, well, I have been a victim of this, or my people have been a victim of this for a long time, or now, you get the same on other parts of the political spectrum. We have been a victim of DEI or whatever. And these are all things that are historically accurate.
I mean, the woke right is doing exactly the same thing today. I don't know. Do we use, on trigonometry, do we talk about that? Do we use this term of art?
I was one of the people that pioneered it.
You did. You coined this, didn't you? Yeah.
But it's got me lots of love and gratitude on the internet.
Yeah,
And for sure, James Lindsley has explained this to no end on his podcast, New Discourses. He discusses the left and the woke and the pushing of DEI and all these things as a form of equalization. But then now the right is coming at it. The left is much better at it. But the right is now also attempting to employ this to show the victimhood on that side. So as opposed to real people doing real work, we have a ton of emotional labor, which it's functionally bullshit because you can't achieve end goals if you can't agree what the end goals are. If you're constantly arguing with people about how you're a bigger victim than they are, how about not be a bigger victim and at least attempt to work it out as opposed to screaming and yelling about it?
Solutions to the real world problems, not the ones that are dreamed up on the internet in a lot of cases, as he said, the woke right or woke left or whoever it would be, when they're trying to sell t-shirts at the same time. Just make your world, as Peterson actually comes to my mind, if you want to fix the world, tidy your own bedroom first. If you want to change the world.
The 12 steps.
So instead of, baby steps. Look around your own house. tidy that up. If you want to improve your local community, there's plenty of places to volunteer at. If you want to improve the world, there's plenty of other organizations where you go out in the Central Africa and you feed millions of people, or there's tons of different ways of going about it instead of angrily screaming on the streets. There's plenty of ways to improve your lot in life.
It's time for a drink now with Tucker.
means you're on to something, Constantine. You're on to something. But the truth is that you will find, again, this is not the exclusive ecosystem of the left. The left got really, really good at this, of conscripting people into the culture war with victim identity. But the right has picked this up like crazy because it's incredibly powerful. And why should, I mean, you should acknowledge the fact that there are injustices in the world. That's the right thing to do. But you don't identify yourself with injustice per se. That's the perfect recipe for misery, to do something like that. On the contrary, you should be joyful. There's something that you can actually do. I mean, the message of most religions is, notwithstanding all the hard things in your life, you're beloved. Notwithstanding that you can have a good life. You know, that's the whole idea, that the good life is open to absolutely everybody.
And in modernity, these things are open to you. We are part of a massive logistical structure that ensures that food gets to where you are. You have power, you have heat in the winter, you have air conditioning in the summer, except where you are and in Europe, where they like to die from the heat. But all of these things are provided as a way to ease us into an ability for everybody in society to be a functional individual that can contribute to the whole. And if you take time to say, I'm a victim, I'm a victim, I'm a victim, you are in no way attempting to advance your culture, advance yourself, advance your family. You're just not doing that. What you're saying is since I'm a victim, I'm stopping everything I could do to advance myself as an individual and be better. What you're saying is, I'm going to stop right here. Everybody's going to look at me being victimized, and then they're just going to say, wow, look at you. You are a victim. Oh, that's awesome. But that doesn't achieve any goals. What that says is, no, I've observed your victimhood. Awesome. Now get up off the floor and go do work, right? Go do something productive.
Anything.
Yeah.
I always said to, when I was dealing with young people, is turn off your phones. Turn off your phones.
I don't appreciate the outcome of your emotional labor. It's not doing anything.
Yeah.
You have bad outcomes.
Well, I kind of didn't use it. In fairness, I was dealing with real world young people. I normally talk to them at their level. Turn off your phone and let's come out and do something. You know, get them out of that rut. Get your body moving. Move one step in front of the other.
Body moving.
So this constant victim. Oh, look at me. I can't get a job because of X, Y, and Z. Right. You got 2 legs, 2 arms. There's plenty of jobs out there. Go door to door during the summer with a lawnmower. Guess what? If you get 20, 30 euros per garden, at the end of the day, you'll have 150 in your back pocket. There's plenty of ways of making money.
Patrick, that represents actual work and not emotional labor. I don't know if that's going to work for them.
But the problem is with this whole emotional labor on both sides, by the way, of the aisle, you'll see, is it's all talk with no substance. Because, especially I was chatting to young people, say on the left or the right, wherever they were coming from at the time, when you look at who they were listening to, I said to one young lady, I said, that lady you're listening to, has she got any solutions to the problems she just mentioned in her entire video? I think it was 2 or 3 minute video. She said, well, no, but I said, there's no but. She's trying to sell you a product. Or another young man who was listening to Andrew Tate at the time. I said, this guy is trying to sell you a product. Look at this guy. These guys are not the people you should be listening to. If you want to listen to anyone, listen to your educators in a lot of ways, if you're in college or school. Or listen to older individuals who have been around the block enough times. Instead of these online personalities who are always trying to sell some angle. Because, as he said, stop playing the victim. Just look around you. The world is not that bad. Just be genuinely thankful of where you are in life. Because there's a hell of a lot worse place in the world than where we are living in the G20s.
I've noticed that even you and I are selling a thing, right? We're on the internet, yes. We're selling, but what we're trying to sell is a critical thinking process that shows that if we have better end goals, or we can agree on end goals, we can achieve better results, right? We want to reduce conflict bring the debate out and say, look, these are the things that are going on. Please be aware of them before you go into things. Reduce the amount of emotional labor, put actual labor into things, do some actual research into things to find out how it is things work so you can actually have a clear defined position on things, as opposed to a slogan that you're screaming out loud that people are like, okay, you've said that thing 1,000 times and now I just don't care. In fact, not only do I
Yes.
not care, I'm now in opposition to the thing that you're screaming and yelling about because I'm tired of you saying it. I'm over you, whatever the you victim thing is going on right now.
You can even see the kind of young people at the moment on both sides are kind of just burnt out from the side they're on. You can even see the downturn in young people when they're saying, we're just fed up with the politics in a lot of ways. Especially in the United States, you can see it because pretty much just a two-party system. You see young people going, we're really just sick of both of them. And that's why you see the different, third-party ideas kind of more and more across campuses and places like that, because young people are not believing what either side is selling anymore, whatever it would be. It is so disenfranchised. It's crazy.
As opposed to, I know you grew up in you grew up in a first world country with all kinds of prosperity, but you're still a victim. Yeah, I mean that's a hell of a way to live. But of course, that makes you really a putty in the hands of the dark triad activist boomer. The person who's a narcissist, the person who's Machiavellian, the person who has psychopathic tendencies, which, by the way, the research is very clear, describes most real activist leaders today in the political environment. They have these tendencies. That's 7% of the population is dark triad, but they're disproportionately represented in the activist community, and they want soldiers. How do you get that? By freaking them out, by making them think that the world is actually against them, as opposed to helping them understand how they can take control, how they can have agency, how life can be joyful, how life can be good.
The victimhood thing removes agency from individuals. So agency is the function of understanding consequences for your actions and that you are in charge of the decisions that you make. But when you remove the ability for them to recognize agency and they get led by those who have narcissistic dark triad traits, then it's not going to be good outcomes for anybody. And he's right. They need soldiers. They need people with boots on the ground or flip-flops or whatever other shoe wear they might have on their feet, right? And they take their little shoe brews and run downtown and scream and yell and hold pre-prepared signs and they scream slogans. Hey, I'm a victim.
Yeah. But when it comes to, as he said, a dark triad there of leaders, you can always look through history. And you literally, it's like a checklist and you're kind of going, okay, this leader had all these traits. As he said, makes up 7% of the population. But the problem with an awful lot of these guys is they're really, really good with slogans.
And stirring up the pot.
But really bad at follow through. But that's the problem. It's we see it a lot more in the modern world, a lot across the G20s. We could name dozens of different politicians, for instance, or world leaders, you could say.
Oh, all over Africa, South America, Europe, everywhere.
Yeah,
at every level.
You can even see the ones who really rise up are the ones who really get the crowd going. If you vote for me, I'm going to raise everyone's boat up.
Right. Well, those personalities are drawn to those power structures and the ability to control, for sure. That's it.
Yes.
And it's not so much that they, how do I explain this? It's not so much that they do it intrinsically, but if the power structures are there that they can capture, then they'll capture existing power structures and then bend them to their will.
And you see it a lot around activism and so on in politics everywhere. But really around all these rallies, you'll always have that one guy who's always, getting everyone riled up. No matter where, by the way, no matter what kind of protest is, there's always that one or two people who will just shell everything together. But they'll have great slogans, fantastic. If you do this, we'll have Y. If you give up, if you say this, we'll have this. It's just, a lot of them turn out to be empty suits in a lot of cases. When you start digging into them.
The thing I despise the most is the ones that say, if you just give up a little bit of your rights. Oh, you mean my natural rights to have free speech or access unabridged to firearms, or I can practice my religion however I choose. I can peaceably assemble. Oh, just give those up a little bit.
But you have to remember, what you always have to remember, one thing about Machiavellian type leaders is they want to stay in charge. They'll find any way of staying in charge. All through history, by the way, you can always see this.
Well, and we're seeing it
And
actually big time in Cuba, right? How the regime that's in charge of Cuba is actually a corporation that gets fed all the money from the taxes and all the assets they collect from the citizens of Cuba, and then they take the money and then just put it into a corporate shell and then do whatever the hell they want to do, to the detriment of all the Cuban people. Like,
Yes.
that power structure has been in place since Fidel Castro took over.
Yeah. And he was a Machiavellian type leader who rallied around the people that it was going to be a communist utopia and so on. But no matter where you live in the world, you will always come across these type of leaders who promise you the sun, moon, and stars. And I've always said to young people is, whoever you vote for, just dig into their background properly. Genuinely find out who they are outside of all the slogans or anything else. Just really dig into them. And you'll find that a lot of them are untruthful in their own lives, because most narcissists are born liars.
Are you saying they're disingenuous in some fashion, Patrick? I can't believe that. Come on now. Really?
I think we can all think of a couple of leaders across the G20s who are, how can I put it, really creative with the truth when it comes to a lot of situations.
But that's the thing that politicians do. It's a thing that politicians do all over the world to gain advantage in anything.
But the dangerous thing is, if you put a Machiavellian type character in charge of your country in any shape, form, or fashion, they'll always want to stay in charge. Always. They'll find some way around the law. They'll find a loophole, or even look at Cuba. He found a way around the law. Venezuela was there. You can always look at even a lot of South American countries. They'll always find a loophole. Well, you can't be president more than 7 years. And then they'll suddenly change the law going, oh, look, I can stay on for 14 years.
Oh,
why is that?
so
I just changed the law.
Yeah, you know, it's lawful but awful.
People are standing there kind of going, how did this happen? You put them in charge. Are you shocked? It's like a guy who's thinking about past his 2 terms, suddenly thinking about a third. You're kind of going, that's not what your law says. Well, technically, you're kind of going, no, technically there's nothing, but hey, look, we're going to roll with it and see what happens.
Same
it
thing
happens all across the G20s, where they kind of, these guys very rarely give up. Really don't go down quietly is the only word I could describe.
Right. It's much the same with the gun laws in the United States as well. Let's get back.
Which is the responsible thing for all of us to do with young people today.
Do you think part of the problem as well, Arthur, is they say comparison is a thief of joy, and with social media, we live in a perpetual state of comparison?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely the case. And that quote is frequently attributed to President Theodore Roosevelt, of all people. And whether he said it on the internet. So it may or may not be his, but it's certainly manifestly true. And I've got data and all kinds of experiments from the literature that show that's exactly the case. As much as if you take photographs on your vacation, you will enjoy the vacation 16% less, and about 25% less if you post them to the internet. So, for example, that's just, all that is sort of empirical verification of the fact that when you're doing something and you're living for other people, when you're trying to hold yourself up to the standards of others, when you're not fully present in the joy that is your life, you're not going to enjoy your life, is what it comes down to. But sure, I mean, you're going to, but fundamentally the problem isn't social comparison. Fundamentally the problem is that our brains are broken. Our brains are broken. We're being shoved 205 times a day on average, which is the number of times that the average American looks at his phone, into the left hemisphere of the brain. The right hemisphere is mystery and meaning and significance and purpose and love and hope. It's the right side of the brain. But no, you're over there in the world of information you didn't ask for things that actually promise you everything and deliver nothing.
So that's what Frank Wright again was talking about, with the entirety of our existence being a mercantile function of stealing your ability to get out of that hemisphere of the brain and actually experience some presentism, being part of the real world, doing things that have meaning, doing things that matter, touching the grass, running around the block, getting on your bike, swimming in the pool, having a vacation. If you're constantly living for other people, and on top of that, somebody sees you're on vacation, they're like, well, I don't have enough money for a vacation. I'm working these 3 jobs. I can't afford medical care. And this knucklehead's in Hawaii.
Yeah, funny enough is I've come across that recently myself. It's when you're down a local pub and you're saying you're just back from such and such a country, they're kind of going, but how did you afford that? And you're kind of going, whoa, wait a second. 1, I stayed for it. 2, it's none of your goddamn business.
Well, you took a vacation to the United States recently, right?
Yes.
And you visited some of the most beautiful places literally on the planet, some of the most beautiful vistas, some of the nicest people. And we took some pictures because you wanted, for your own memory, a picture of the places you've been, seen, and experienced. You didn't say, hey, everybody in the wide world, I went here and did this. I'm super cool. I'm the best. I actually had enough finances to do it.
Yeah, we didn't bring the whole Instagram circle light or anything like that, you know. What an awful lot of young people do is they turn their vacation into an Instagram vacation more than a vacation.
Right. And at that point, you're living for someone else. You're trying to sell the product of the goodness of your life and how amazing your things are, which brings other people down. Like he was saying, there's a percentage of joy that you lose in attempting to live for someone else. That is empirically true. That is a thing that is true.
Oh, yes. I've always said to young people is, if you go anywhere, do it for yourself. Don't go on holidays where everyone else is going, because you're not going to enjoy it. Because you're just not. Because that stage, as he said, you're living for somebody else. Because when I was traveling, when I was involved in young people, and I started traveling to go to different parts of Poland, different parts of outside the norm of what normal holidays they were used to. They're going, well, why did you go there? I said, something different. Why would I travel or spend money to travel where everybody else in Ireland is traveling to? I might as well just stay at home and travel in Ireland. That's the case.
And it was the complicated problems of engineering and analysis as opposed to the complex issues of meaning and mystery. And if you're just never there, well, guess what? You're going to be sad and angry.
And that sadness and anger, particularly when you've got young men who are more prone to extremes of emotion, that tends to lead towards extremism, doesn't it?
It can, absolutely. Although I would contest that it's mostly men, on the contrary. What we find is that, and this comes from the work of John Haidt, who's just the best on this, and Gene Twenge and a lot of other people, Brad Wilcox down at the University of Virginia, who show that there's incredible problems of depression and anxiety, of mood disorders, of diagnosed mental illness, particularly for progressive women under 30. Progressive women under 30 have a 56% chance of having been formally diagnosed with at least one mental illness. Why? Well, because of this. Because this is how it's manifest. You know, when depression is largely shown among women with sadness and men with anger. That's how you see it. A lot of women don't understand that about their husbands. Like, my husband's so grumpy all of a sudden. He's depressed. He's depressed. Well, he's not crying. Of course not. That's not how men do it. Men do it.
This is another thing. So this is also a root cause a lot for the reduction in childbirth rates, because women are sad and depressed and men are angry. And it is hard to generate positive familial relationships when you have sad and angry attempting to get together, along with, well, there's a ton of other reasons, but this is a huge factor contributor. And if over half of the population of young women who have achieved majority at the age of 30 are not in a state where they could even consider starting a family, on top of the financial crises that they're experiencing at the same time.
Yeah, I no wonder. By the way, no wonder people under the age of 35 are sad and depressed. As you said, no wonder they're not going to have kids. They're living in a very tough economic position where they're, as you say, they're just barely making ends meet for rent, health, the whole 9 yards. And then young men are angry because when they do meet a partner, they're both in the same position of, we're barely making ends meet, and then you want to bring a third person into this scenario. That's why it's very easy for a lot of people. I'm going to really take a shot at the right when I say this, telling young people, oh, you should have more kids. I would love to turn around and say to these guys, who's going to pay for these kids? How are you going? you're talking about an investment of at least 20,000 a year to raise one kid. Where are the young people who are barely making it going to get that money from?
Right. So you have a couple that's working 3 to 5 part-time jobs to pay the rent for an apartment that's way overcharged. And then on
Yes.
top of that, they are busy being told that they're victims and that they can't do unless they're hollering slogans. It doesn't go a long way. It doesn't go a
By
long
the
way
way,
at all.
as he said, they have all this stuff coming from them at both sides. They have the victim mentality from whoever it's from be. They're barely making ends meet. They're stressed out of their minds. And then people expect them to have kids then on top of that. That's not a good recipe for romance, no matter what way you dress it up. When people are stressed,
I have a friend of mine
when
who's,
people are stressed, they don't really get into a romantic mood in a lot of ways.
yeah, it's very difficult. I have a friend of mine who's 27, 28, and we're talking about his friend group. And now he's got, I don't know, 8 to 10 folks. He went to college with some of these folks. He works with some of them. He says no one in the office he works in, nor anybody he went to college with, has children. None of them. And then he says his friends he's talked to said, yeah, and their friend groups also, almost none of them have children. And that's a recipe for disaster.
Did your friend ask why?
Yeah, for the most part, they just don't want to bring people in because they feel things are just so bad and horrible in the world. And we talked about it before. It's not that bad. It's not as bad.
It's not that bad.
Yeah, the world is not on fire.
Yes, but economically, young people are stressed because they're trying to get on the property ladder. They're trying to do all these life goals because they have a lot of boomers, by the way, lecturing them about this, saying, you should at your age, I had 15 kids and 3 houses or whatever rubbish they come up with. When you dig down to the economics of it, you're kind of going, well, back in your day, all you needed was 3 times the yearly wage to get a house. Now it's 8 times. There's a big difference.
It's not great.
Like health. Look at the health insurance over in the United States. It's absolutely crazy. Absolutely nutty, the premiums over there.
Yeah, it's insane.
And then you were asking them to have kids. I've always come back to the point is, I'd love to sit down with some of these pundits and say, okay, how would you help these young people afford to have these kids? How would you make them less stressed? Are you going to give them affordable housing? Are you going to make health insurance cheaper for them? Are you going to open up more job opportunities? How are you going to, suddenly spike your birth rate?
I think a lot of this comes down, at least in the United States, to the creation of an income tax, as well as the creation of the Federal Reserve, and then the slow erosion of rights, the slow erosion across all the G20s of your ability to function on your own. Now, everything you do requires a permit. Why do I need a permit for things I have a right to have? Why are you saying, if I want to assemble, why do I have to get something from you that says I can be in an area? If I can freely assemble, then I can freely assemble, as long as I'm not stopping traffic. If there's a place that's big enough for me and all the folks I want to hang out with to assemble, I should be able to do that. I shouldn't need a permit from anybody.
By the way, across the G20s, I see plenty of people having protests all over the place, but all different types of things.
But it's regulated.
I think
it's not a freedom of assembly. It is a regulated thing. You have to go to the county council or to the county board or the city.
Because obviously you're not, because if you're going to have a free-for-all, you're going to have a situation of guys suddenly protesting and blocking up entire main roads, or in our case, we had a fuel protest there recently where they started blocking up our one main refinery for our country. There has to be limits on your rights as well. In a lot of ways, common sense limits.
Well, yes, limits as far as don't stop logistics from moving to get resources to the country. Right. And I know, but the thing is if I'm not going to get into that area and do things that are counter to production and productivity, then I shouldn't be restricted in any way. I should have the right to assemble. I should have the right to free speech to say the thing. You do have the right.
The problem is, in the United States, especially Americans in general, is that the minute you turn around and tell them you cannot do a thing, they'll find a reason. Well, according to such and such a place, I have a right to do this. Yes, you have a right to do anything you want within reason.
Right, but this comes back to agency, right?
Yes.
But I don't want my rights violated. I want to be able to freely assemble. I want to be able to say the things that I want to say. I want to be able to have a gun on my hip while I do it. because that right should not be infringed. There's lots of things that go with this, right? But understanding that by taking my rights away just a little bit here and there, you're not doing a good thing, right? But the thing is, this is, again, more high trust versus low trust, right?
No, it comes down to when you look at, say, Europe versus the United States in a lot of ways. The United States, in general, get very upset if you touch anything with their rights. And I fully agree with you. I understand why they get very touchy-feely about
Right,
these things.
because the rights are natural rights. Right?
Natural rights come to your Constitution. Now, bear in mind, the Constitution was written how many years ago? About 250 years ago? And society has moved on in a lot of ways. Yes, your rights are very important, but they also have to be balanced with common sense. Yes, you have the right to have a gun on your hip, as you would say.
Absolutely.
Which is fantastic. No one's disputing that.
Oh,
Some states have laws around you can do this, you can do that with your gun, but you still, for the most part, you can still have a gun of some sort in a lot of ways. No one's physically going to your house, taking out your gun safe and all your guns. You still have your rights. They're just limited from state to state. But in general, you still have your rights. I know
right,
people...
Right. So what you're saying is
get a
it's
bit
okay
upset
to
over
have
it.
that right, but they can abridge it in some fashion. Okay.
They can abridge it in some way because there has to be common sense around most laws or
Right,
even
but
constitution.
The problem is when you wrap the words common sense and safety around a lot of these rights, you are discounting the right. So if I were to go purchase a firearm and they say I have to wait 30 days to get the firearm, then they're delaying my right, which is exactly the same thing as saying you don't have that right. See what I'm saying?
Right. Okay, I do agree with you there. That is wrong. But for the most part, even when you come into the likes of free speech and stuff like that, you do have pretty robust laws around all these kind of things. No,
Well, for
there's
sure.
no one.
But
There's no one kicking your door, and there's no big boogeyman out there sticking a boot on your neck.
right,
You
but
know, for the most part.
removing my rights a little bit at a time will lead to that, as we have seen in the past. Anyway,
And by the way, the United States has is in danger of doing that. Not just your gun rights, but a lot of your freedom of speech rights, and so on.
for sure.
You can even see it if you write certain things in the United States. You can guaranteed, as a lot of New York reporters have suddenly figured out, you have the FBI knocking on your door. You know, you have rights, but then you have people who are trying to wrap it up in safety of, well, you shouldn't have wrote this article about such and such.
Well, you know what?
Because safety reasons.
Here's an even funnier one. Have you seen our algorithm for our views? We've talked about this in the past. We'll have a video that does 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 views, and the next one will literally have 14, which means that it doesn't make any logical sense for that to happen unless we're throttled somehow. Like, you know what I'm saying? But again, this is all these things affect our society and our community because they're all algorithm driven, and our youth is being horrifically affected by it, being told, hey, you don't really need these rights. You don't really need these things. They're not really necessary.
Yeah.
That's not
the
true.
funny thing is,
They're absolutely necessary.
I do see other YouTubers who, how could I put it, change their flags with the algorithm is the best word.
Yeah. But the thing is, I don't want to get into that niche where I feel I have to say the thing that either our watchers or viewers want. I want to give a fair and balanced and critical thinking, not critical race type thing, but critical thinking angle on these things, right? And that's why we're doing this in the first place.
And by the way, in YouTube, by the way, you have the right to say certain things on YouTube and not others. And I remember when YouTube started bringing in these new community guidelines there a couple of years back, and a lot of Americans turned around and said, "What about my freedom of speech?" And YouTube was going, "Yeah, you can have that, but this is our platform."
Well, I understand it's a platform, but if they
this is our business. We're a private entity. We're not the state.
I understand that, except Section 230 specifically indicates you are either a publisher or you're a platform.
Yes.
When YouTube adjusts anything that you have put on there, then they are a producer and they are liable. They're no longer a platform because they're adjusting it, and they're also adjusting it by throttling, which is not cool.
By the way, one famous senator said the same thing. Ted Cruz said that at the start when YouTube started changing its algorithm. Not just YouTube, by the way, other social media were doing it at that time. And he was a really big champion there for a very, very long time. Until he came up for election. And then suddenly, big paycheck was made from Alphabet, by the way, who owns which is Google, by the way. Gave a big check, and now he's no longer saying much about it. Understand what I mean?
It happens.
So
it happens.
It happens quite a lot. It happens in politics. It happens everywhere. You can have as many rights as you want in your country, but when it comes to private companies like YouTube or X or wherever your platform is, you have to play by their game. You have no choice.
Well, you have no choice because Section 230 won't be enforced. So if you have
No, it
anything...
won't.
No, it won't. Do you have anything for the good of the people, my friend?
No, I think we've gone on way over time for this one, actually.
Yeah.
Way over time. Yeah.
So the long and the short is there's a victim mentality that is causing all of these youth in our society to feel unwell, and then they feel unable to perform in such a way that is meaningful. And that's just not the best. So,
it's called a death of hope.
Called what now?
The death of hope.
The death. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, everybody. For Patrick McCallum, I'm Alex Johansson. Like the like, ring the bell, subscribe, and help us beat the algorithm. We're the A&P Gents, and we are out.